are those thumbs, those wonderful, glorious thumbs of mine, enjoying a simpler time when the ASUS Transformer Prime was a little baby and the world was at its feet. A tablet, a laptop, a hybrid. The Prime was a world of possibilities. I mean, just look at it. It was ready to transform. With the fastest and most powerful technology supporting a newly updated and sugar-sweet operating system, surely the Prime couldn't fail. I mean, it sold me as soon as I saw it. I even parted with my trusty and reliable iPad to get one of these. The ability to detach, dock, plug in USB, Bluetooth without restriction, and customise to my heart's content. It was all simply irresistible. And look at the adventure it's taken me on. Reviews on every aspect of the device, helpful tips to get the most out of your new toy, fantastic app after fantastic app, and requests to confirm your hopes and dispel your fears. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been emotional. But has it been enjoyable? Has the Prime delivered on what I expected it to do? To transform the notion that tablets are merely to consume information and not to create. Furthermore, is the Android ecosystem even ready to embrace the tablet platform, and is it suitable for the mass market? And is it worth the pain of trying to find one of these elusive things and pay more for it than any other tablet? Finally, the unavoidable question, the yardstick that it has to be compared against. Is the ASUS Transformer Prime better than the Apple iPad? And I'm not talking about the new iPad, I'm talking about any iPad. Well, let's find out. Are my thumbs really telling the truth? While this may look like a promotional recruitment video for the Borg, in reality it is ASUS's one promotional video for the Transformer Prime. Rising up from the peak of a digital mountain, it sells itself as the best. And I must admit, there is a lot to sell. A beautiful, luxurious design that, even after all this time, looks delicious. And if we forget the speaker claims for a second, we see that unique and very tempting selling point. The detachable keyboard dock. More than anything else, that was the feature I really wanted. So I could have got an original Transformer, but the Prime also had this. The new Tegra 3 processor that convinced me that the Prime would be able to do anything, instantly. A USB port and huge battery life were all toppings to put on top of the ice cream sandwich Android operating system. For me, it wasn't a question of if, rather when, where, and how much. Astonishingly, for me, the when turned out to be the exact date retailers had promised here in the United Kingdom, January the 12th, 2012. Even more astonishingly, and no doubt much to the annoyance of many, I didn't even pre-order mine. I simply pressed my ears to the forums and waited, convinced that the reported shortages would claim victims who thought that by throwing their ring into the hat in December and ordering from the big retailers, they would be guaranteed a tablet on launch date. And then, seemingly outside of all the pre-order mess, one day before the release date, one retailer confirmed on the phone they had stock in a warehouse waiting for delivery. I took my chance and ordered. I collected it the following day, and I felt so smug about myself, I produced the very video you're watching right now. As for the price, astronomical, eye-watering, bank-breaking. For the tablet and dock package, I paid £500. That's nearly $800. The one saving grace was I had sold my iPad to fund this purchase for £300 a month or so earlier. Anyway, I had my Prime. First impressions? Wow was my first impression. Usually professional pictures and snazzy promotions can lead to a feeling of disappointment when you first set your eyes upon your new gadget. But, like Apple products, the Prime just felt right from the start. It was sleek and pure and ever so delightfully shiny, like a constant beaming smile. The dock promised just as much too. A full QWERTY keyboard with lots of tablet specific function keys, and again another super slim design as advertised. That suggested that the tablet's portability would not be affected at all. And when connected, in a physical sense at least, the Prime just feels right. It is quite heavy and it robs the Prime of its portability in your hands, but when it's docked, it's not going to be in your hands. It's going to be on a table or on your lap. In that sense it feels weighty and sturdy and secure. And when it's docked, you get to enjoy this lovely experience of simply lifting a lid and there it is, on and ready to use without any boot up or even the need to unlock it. And if you need to, you can even unlock it with the press of a key. And when you're done, close the lid and it's locked on standby. Very easy, intuitive and natural. I liked the peripheral inputs the Prime had to offer too, especially coming from an iPad background. The SD and micro SD card slots mean that you can take the Prime storage capacity easily over 100 GB, and I was eager to use a HDMI port too, as I've never had one before. And I sank my teeth straight into the USB port, plugging in whatever I could find to see what would work. I think it's pretty obvious what I've used it for most, considering the amount of airtime Super Mario World has got on all my videos so far. And while the Prime only has one USB port, that port will support a hub so you can plug in a mouse and, say, a USB stick. You can't use an external hard drive in this fashion, however. It needs to go directly to the Prime. But as first impressions go, design-wise, the Prime completely won me over. For one thing, I could look at its shiny back all day and just spin it round so it does this wonderful effect on the screen. Its slimness and weight are often missed too, but they do add positives. And just look at it in its docked state. It looks perfect. Even now, after a couple of months of ownership, I do sometimes still just glance at it for a few seconds and admire its beautiful design. However, I'm not going to let the Prime off without some scrutiny. I did spot two design flaws straight away. The first and most obvious being the speaker. To begin with, having one speaker at one side of a tablet makes no sense, and for it to be planted on the back of a tablet projecting sound away from you makes even less sense. And my second issue came after a couple of days of using the Prime. The metal arch that connects the tablet and the dock is pretty heavy, and when you add that to the weight of a tablet versus the weight of the keyboard, there is a centre of gravity issue. If you lay the Prime on your lap and sit in bed or sit on a sofa, the Prime has a tendency to want to fall away from you onto its back. It's irritating, but it isn't a deal breaker. But enough about the looks, let's just use the damn thing. And let's start with a rather offensive gesture that the Prime and Android is about to direct towards Apple. Yes, that swirling, flashing loading symbol. You are going to see that or watch this on an iPad, unless of course you download the BBC iPlayer app, which ironically doesn't seem to want to work on the Prime. But Flash videos and most Flash games do work on a Prime, and this is a huge relief, as I don't know where I'd be without my train simulator game. The Android interface felt familiar and accessible, just like the iPad. And as I expected, screen scrolling was perfect and applications loaded at the click of a finger. Before long, I was beginning to play with my Prime, installing custom launchers to change the layout of my screen. Soon after that, I was applying widgets that delivered news on screen and displayed useful information like battery life and so on. I bought the Prime because I wanted to be able to do this, and that's exactly what I enjoyed during my first impressions. To be able to mould the Prime to my own preferences and styles. It took a little bit of effort to get there, but the exploration is all part of the fun. To an extent, anyway. Sometimes you can go a little too far with your enthusiasm and hinder yourself, like I did when I downloaded Go Launcher, which, at the time, simply wasn't suited for tablet use. I also tried to harmonise the concept of a tablet and a laptop early on, as you can see in this video. I was keen to show that by using the mouse and the keyboard I could quickly search for something, find it, and navigate to it faster than any other tablet. While this is true, I realise now that I was simply showing the camera something that I could technically do, but something I rarely do in reality. Pressing on the screen seems more natural than using a mouse, keyboard dock or no keyboard dock. I also found that I quickly binned the software features ASUS provided with the tablet. One of the things I love doing is reading books on my tablet, but the book reading app that comes with the Prime is completely unusable. At best it's very sluggish and frustrating to use. At worst, it doesn't work to the point that you can't use it. And the ASUS eZine widget is a good attempt at providing a home screen hub, but it's not flexible enough and it commands too much of your home screen. When I resized it, the eZine removed features it wanted to remove, not what I wanted to remove. This is Android, it does what I tell it to do, not the other way round. As you might be able to detect, I'm getting a little testy here, picking at the corners and the sides of the Prime. And that's because my first impressions were beginning to sink. Perhaps it was all those rumours I was starting to read about in terms of non-functioning GPS, dodgy Wi-Fi and odd screen flicker. But to be honest, I was having troubles of my own. It crashed 3 or 4 times during my first couple of days. That never happened with the iPad. I can only remember that crashing once in nearly 2 years. I also found that Flash was unpredictable to a point where I was sometimes happy to avoid it or even switch it off to try and stabilise my web browsing. And, in general, I thought the performance was average at best. I didn't feel to be getting anywhere any faster than with my iPad. I felt the same way when I bought an iPad, to be honest, that this whole tablet market was just a very expensive gimmick and that I'd made a very costly mistake. However, I soon grew to love my iPad. Would it be the same for the Prime? Well, after 50 videos and over 5 hours of Prime coverage, the answer is no. I do not love my Prime. But for the time being at least, I have learned to live with it. This is where the dissection, both good and bad, begins. And I'd like to start with the best thing, probably the Prime and the Android's greatest asset, the marketplace, or Google Play as it's recently become known as. If you haven't got the application you need, the chances are it exists on the market. You could well argue this with the iPad and its iTunes App Store, but the crucial difference, and I must stress that this is a personal opinion, is that you can get everything you possibly want for free, legally, and without any need to hack your tablet. For example, I wanted a book reading app, so I went out and found exactly what I wanted, an app called Cool Reader. I wanted a news aggregating app and I found exactly what I wanted, News Republic. I wanted a way to lock files. I found exactly what I wanted, File Locker. I wanted a news ticker app. I found exactly what I wanted, News Ticker. A few of the best applications I've found so far include MX Video, a fabulous movie player that allows you to scroll backwards and forwards using the entire screen. Another one is SwipePad, which offers a wonderful way to switch from one application to another by sweeping your finger in from the edge of the screen. And, for when you don't have your keyboard dock at hand, Perfect Keyboard enables you to split your keyboard so that you can type with just your thumbs. All of these apps are free, and there's thousands more out there that are just like it. It's odd then that I should find that the apps that I expect to be the most native to the Prime are the ones that seem to disappoint the most. I've already explained how apps designed specifically for and supplied with the Prime, such as the book reading app and the MyZine widget, aren't very good. And then there's Google Earth, which I expected to be blitzed by the Prime. Instead, 3D building models render very poorly, and it simply crashed when I tried to jump from New York to Mount Everest. And I was extremely irritated by the fact I had to delve into the marketplace to solve my speaker concerns. The highest volume setting is pathetic. I had to get an app called EQUALIZER to hack the sound levels. Don't get me wrong, I'm delighted there's a solution out there, but why on earth did I have to go out there and fix it in the first place? Mass market consumers are simply not going to do this. They're not going to know how. I said at the start of the review that I wanted to find out if the Prime could be more than a content consumption device like other tablets, but sadly I was left frustrated during my creative moments. The movie studio is adequate, but it doesn't use a keyboard dock at all really, and after a very frustrating 20 minutes putting together a movie, it couldn't render it in 1080p, which is inexcusable given that the Prime has a camera capable of recording at this resolution, and when it did render, the video was botched and all out of sync. And then there's OnLive Desktop, a new cloud-based service that gives you Microsoft Office absolutely free. As long as you have a decent internet connection, it works surprisingly well. You can even save files and download them off the cloud onto your local machine, whether it be a Prime or a computer. I can't criticise the app at all, it's fantastic, especially considering that it's free if you just want to use Office. I guess the problem is that it shows up the Prime because there's no Android Office app that can compete with it really. And it makes me feel a little ridiculous when I could just use Office on my laptop anyway. When it comes to creativity, maybe I'm expecting too much too soon. The Prime hasn't been out for very long after all. Maybe those Tegra 3 powered apps are just around the corner. The concern is, and when I think about it, my concern will always be, as the only tablet around that uses a dedicated keyboard dock, is it too niche for app makers to really care about and support all that the Prime could potentially offer? I'm hesitant to recommend the Prime productivity wise either. There are plenty of apps, yes, but do I trust them to do a better job than a netbook at less than half the price? No, not at all. Don't think for a moment that this is capable of getting you through higher education. It could supplement a laptop for maybe taking quick notes in lectures and for meetings, but I would not want to use one for essay writing or heavy duty studying. So if I'm not going to create or work on my Prime, I'll have to go back to what we all usually do with tablets. I'm going to have to play with my Prime. And the one thing I can always guarantee to play reliably on the Prime is the HDMI feature. It plugs straight into the television, switches to that mode and works flawlessly without any complaints at all. I suppose it's a bit like turning my television into a smart TV. I can browse on the web and watch all the media stuff I have on the Prime. The resolution is absolutely pinpoint perfect, so it's easy to read stuff. The colours are always beautiful and amazingly vibrant, and of course I can play Super Mario World on many inches of LCD television. If there is one thing that the Prime, for me at least, has nailed absolutely perfectly, it is the HDMI capabilities of the device. Next on everyone's to-do list with a tablet is internet browsing. Everyone loves to slouch on a couch and browse away for hours. But here is a test that seems to epitomise everything that is disappointing with the Prime's browsing capabilities. I'm going to Facebook to show you how swift it is until I reach a specific stumbling block. In this case, pressing on the comments section of somebody's status. Why did I have to wait so long for the comments to appear? I agree that this could be the app's fault and not the Prime's, but regardless of whether the software or the hardware is responsible, the problem is there is a bottleneck somewhere which slows everything down, or, in the case of the flash videos I showed you earlier, stops it working completely. Now, a partial remedy for this has been to download Chrome Beta, which I have now adopted as my default browser. It lacks Flash and proper desktop viewing support, but it is by far the fastest browser around on tablets at the moment. But don't be fooled into thinking that this is a complete success story for the Prime in terms of finding a decent browser. Watch here as I compare the Prime against a HP touchpad running Android and using Google Chrome Beta. There is barely any difference at all. In fact, can you even tell which is the Prime and which is the touchpad? If they were both designed to be the same shape, I'd almost bet you wouldn't be able to tell on performance alone. I also find that the fiddly little things that websites often demand of your browser when you want to write things, such as comment pop-ups, built-in forum features and JavaScript functions, cause problems for the Prime. I could go on and on, but in a nutshell, the things you take for granted when you use a computer, you can't take for granted on the Prime. I was really hoping that with the technology inside this thing, and for the price I paid, I wouldn't have to worry about this kind of stuff. But the biggest worry of them all is the one that seems to have infected my Prime from its very birth. It's an issue that you have seen all throughout this review, and yet you won't even be aware of it. I wasn't even consciously aware of it for about a month, but it was there all along, staring me in the face. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but there was a critical voice in the back of my head saying something just didn't look or feel quite right. And then I did a tablet comparison video, and I noticed that the colour saturation on my Prime seemed slightly off. Whereas my HP touchpad has a warm, deep feel to its colours, the Prime seems washed out and smudged. But at the same time, the brightness level, or the backlight, or something else, seems to make the colours bleed into each other. It's most noticeable on web pages with a lot of white background. They don't actually look white, more of a very, very faint off yellow colour. And has that flickering started to bug you yet? Those horrible lines fuzzing throughout all my videos? Yes, it drives me crazy too. Now obviously it doesn't do this in the real world, but I did question this on forums and it was dismissed as a lower refresh rate. Why? I don't know of any other new device that produces this horrible effect on camera. This might be a placebo thing that's going on here, but I wonder if this contributes to the washed out colours and supports what I'm going to say now, that long use of a Prime starts to strain my eyes quicker than any other screen I use. Now, as I've said, all this only really became apparent to me after about a month, and only when I was able to compare the Prime against another tablet device. But now I see it, I can't shake the feeling that the screen is substandard. And it's not as if I can ignore it. The screen is the prime real estate of any tablet. And unfortunately for the Prime, I've been spoilt by the Super AMOLED display of my Samsung Galaxy S2, which is just sublime. The Prime screen just isn't in the same league at all. In fact, resolution aside, I would say my old iPad 1's screen is better than this. Now, I'm going to hold myself here before this review dissolves into a rant. I hope I've shown you in equal measure the positive and negative aspects of the Prime as it stands today. So, as I start to conclude this review, we should start asking ourselves, what does the future hold for the ASUS Transformer Prime? The first question, which nobody seems to be able to answer at the moment, is, does the Prime even have a future? Consider the evidence so far. This tablet has been notoriously difficult to purchase for nearly 3 months now. I am yet to see one on display in a shop here in the United Kingdom. It seems that, from ASUS's perspective, there is little appetite to address the shortages and flood the market with Primes. And do those people who manage to buy a Prime consider themselves lucky? From the general chatter around the internet, the primary faults seem to be faulty GPS, poor Wi-Fi reception, screen flickering, random rebooting and backlight bleed. And then there are a million more issues affecting individuals. As you can see from my review, I have rubbish speakers and a poor quality screen. The complaints have been so vehement that some are ordering for a recall to get more reliable batches out to those who feel cheated that they haven't received what they were promised. ASUS has done little to help themselves either, announcing a replacement in the form of the Infinity weeks after the Prime made its retail debut. It hardly fills you with confidence that the Prime is ever going to be truly fixed. And now on to the big question, the one which I've teased for so long and I'm sure you want answering. Does the Prime have a future against the Apple iPad? Forget for a moment that the iPad has the weight of Apple behind it. There are two powerful words that sum up why the device is so good. It works! After a week of using the iPad, you're pretty certain what it can and cannot do. Yes, I know it doesn't support Flash, and it's a highly controlled and restrictive environment. But as a user you quickly accept this and go about doing what the iPad can do. And what it can do, it does very well. The Prime, however, and by extension Android, doesn't do this. It hints and suggests and teases you with these wonderful things that you think you're going to go off and achieve, and then it fails to deliver just when you need it to. There's always an error or a bottleneck or a missing function lurking around the next corner. After a while you begin to lose faith, and worse still, trust. So, the conclusion is, I just don't trust my Prime. I thought that with the dock and the USB and the Android operating system, the Prime would achieve synergy, a device that is more than the sum of its parts. Well, until now there hasn't been an opposite word for synergy. I think I've just found at least the phrase. It's ASUS Transformer Prime. The Prime, sadly, isn't a hybrid netbook tablet. It's a tablet with a keyboard that 90% of the time I use more as a stand. What I think I really want is this. Yes, crucify me if you want, but Windows 8 makes a lot of sense to me. The always-on, instant accessibility of a Metro interface appeals to me, and if it's coupled with the ability to switch to a fully fledged and capable laptop, then yes, I'll definitely have some of that. Now all this seems like such a negative way to end this review, but throughout all that I've just said, I realise that I can actually find some good in the Prime, because if you were to say to me, if you dislike the Prime so much, why don't you sell it and buy an iPad? The answer, truthfully, is I'm not sure I would. The Prime is still very young and still has unbelievable potential if it's properly tapped into. And I think I might be taking my Prime for granted just a little too much. I use it every day for browsing, reading and watching films. It has found a place in my life, just not a place in my heart yet. If you've watched any of my other videos about the Prime, you can see the enthusiasm I have for this technology. I love exploring Android in the marketplace, so maybe I should man up a bit and expect it to fall over once in a while to have such freedom. And when the stars do align and the Prime works just as it intends to and as you expect it to, it is a joy to use. So this is my definitive review of the ASUS Transformer Prime, but it is not the end of the adventure or my story. I have to say a huge, massive thank you to every one of you who has liked, commented and subscribed to my videos. I will continue to make them, and I'll continue to use my thumbs to the best of my abilities. So come on tablet, show me that you haven't reached the prime of your life yet.